I'm Power Ranger.
Yeah, you are.
No, but seriously, I'd like you to think about the future. I'd like you to seriously consider what the average life might be like in, say, 50 years. Do you think that as the current trends go, that things will be better for the average person? I mean, or do you think that the mounting problems of globalization, climate change, civil unrest, stagnant wages, the housing crisis, the collapse of social security, and jobs increasingly getting phased out by automation will make the average person's life more difficult? Things look pretty grim. And I think we, as a generation, we feel this. As in, I'm part of the millennial generation. I was born in 1993. And millennials are people who were born from 1981 to 1996. If you look at the numbers, they've had a rough time. The older ones got hit with the Great Recession just as they were hitting the job market, which means that if they got a job at all, they had to undervalue their skill set.
Ah, the sweet smell of an all-day sucker.
So let's say the average wage used to be $36,000. Well, to get a job back then, you might have had to offer a better deal. So you went with $30,000. So now to get to $36,000, you have to get a 20% raise, whereas most people would have started out at that point.
I cannot believe you.
Rose, listen to me. I can explain.
You are making $500,000 and you were only going to pay me 30?
You're getting 30 grand? I'm getting 1,000.
You guys are getting paid?
So there's been studies that point to the fact that even a decade later, people are still not recovering. Because these are very large jumps to make, especially early on in your career. And might be the case that if you start in a certain position, it's very difficult to claw yourself out. Now, younger millennials, like myself, didn't have the 2008 crisis, but they did have now the coronavirus recession. And I think a similar situation will happen. Fortunately for myself, by the time that coronavirus hit, I was already in a decent position from a career perspective, so it hasn't particularly affected me much. Other people in my age range, I can't say the same for them.
Oh my God, we're doomed!
We're a generation that feels betrayed by the status quo. We are expected to receive none of the benefits, but bear all of the costs. I mean, who really thinks that they will ever cash in their retirement pot? I think the vast majority of people are resigned to consider it more of a tax than an actual thing that will in some way benefit them in the future. Because we can do math. We can see that it's essentially a pyramid scheme where the population will simply not increase enough to warrant this. People are waking up to the fact that this is a thoroughly unsustainable state of affairs.
That this is not one of those shady pyramid schemes you've been hearing about. No, sir. Our model is the trapezoid that guarantees each investor an 800% return within hours of your initial... Uh-oh, the cops!
But in regards to the corporate elite, they like this state of affairs. They enjoy it.
This is their plan, people. These are demons.
I mean, I generally think that if most people understood what is happening, not behind the scenes, but just under the noses of people, I believe that they'd rise up in revolution.
Сука, блядь!
Take just the concept of quantitative easing. This pushed the interest rates way down.
I've fallen and I can't get up.
in certain positions, it even put it under negative rates. So, for the last decade, the elites have lived in a world where negative rates are a thing. In other words, you can literally get paid to borrow money.
It's free real estate.
As long as you don't lose the money, you'll earn a profit. Same thing with quantitative easing. So much money is being printed. So it's in the billions every single month, and that's just the normal state of affairs now. And these large corporations are getting the benefit. They're essentially stealing from the taxpayer by lining their pockets, and there's little benefit to be had for the average person other than inflation in the long run once the velocity of money increases.
My straw reaches across the room and starts to drink your milkshake. I drink your milkshake. I drink it up!
So while the average person is not aware of this type of thing happening, they do feel that they're being screwed somehow by the state of affairs. They do feel that it's not working for them. And the millennials especially, they feel that they've become the sacrificial offering to the great economic gods. None of their dreams will happen, none of their wishes will happen, but in the meantime, they're saddled with debt. They're saddled with the expectations of a generation to take care of them. A lot of breath is spent railing on about the boomers, but I don't think that's a particularly productive state of affairs. I mean, I generally don't think any generation would have behaved all that differently had they grown up in an era where infinite economic possibilities were available, where if someone in upper management didn't want to retire, no problem, because there was so much expansion in the economy that if you were a middle manager, in a few short months or years, there'd be an entirely new division that you could be transferred to and rise up in the hierarchy. Now, those types of situations are stagnant.
Shortly after, Seattle area consulting firm Brink and Tiller received a resume from Corey Wilhelm, a college graduate with a Bachelor's of Arts degree in communications. Human Resources Director Robert Bradshaw immediately fast-tracked Wilhelm's application and spoke with The Onion about this exceptional candidate.
Well, the second I saw Corey's resume, I knew I had to send it straight up to our CEO.
So, when my father asks why anyone would vote for Trump or why a crypto-communist got elected in Mexico, where I'm from, that's why. The status quo has failed the young generation. If we aren't saddled by unpayable debt, our job prospects are crippled as the top positions are clogged by people who refuse to retire and the economy isn't expanding enough to warrant it. This is despite the fact that, statistically speaking, millennials work the most hours and also don't take holidays, precisely because they're so insecure about their jobs, because they feel that if they take holidays, they will be replaced. Somebody in the upper tier of management will notice, oh, well, we don't really need this position, or we could do it with someone cheaper. Despite the fact that productivity per worker has increased over the last few decades, real wages have stagnated throughout this time as well. Despite the fact that there's the expectation to buy more to be an effective member of society, like a phone, computer, and housing has only increased in price.
Fire in the hole!
Most millennials live in flatmates. They have no hope ever of living in a private home. They will always have a random person that they're not particularly close to living with them at their home. And it's grating for them to compare what was available to the previous generations as opposed to now.
None of you seem to understand. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
After a lifetime of work, most people rarely have capital to show for it. That is why people are turning communists. Because capitalism, at least as it currently stands, is not working. We might be all adrift in the same ocean, but boats are hardly the same. Capitalism, or perhaps a more apt name, corporatism, has failed us. Large corporations do not care for our interests. They care for maximizing their profit, which will maximize their quarterly returns. And this short-term mindset is harming society.
I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Space!
People start looking for someone to blame, and charlatans begin to point to them and say, I can do something to solve this issue. They start saying, it's the billionaires in the distribution of resources. Communism is for you. Or, at the other side of the aisle, we have, it's the Marxists and immigrants. Capitalism is for you. The fact of the matter is that we're in a very complicated time in human history where a bunch of things are happening that are not immediately under our control. And there's no clear solution. Only charlatans are offering the clear-cut solutions because they want power. They don't want to solve the problem. They thrive from the maelstrom. If the problem is ever solved, they lose their power. So it's not in their interests. Their interests rely on simply giving you the impression that they're going to solve something. But in the end, they don't.
Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder.
So, the only thing that seems to be clear about the status quo is that it's not working. So people pick a side and become ever more extremists. I mean, after 2020, after the lockdowns, after there was talk about civil war in the US, after half of the population seems to not believe in the results of a democratic election and the supposed bastion of democracy, the only thing that seems to be clear is that the status quo is not working. So people pick a side and become ever more extremists. This is not a problem of communism. Let me be clear. I used communism because that is the thing that would get clicks. There's also the issue of fascism. At the end of the day, people want a solution to the broken status quo, and there will be would-be dictators who offer a readily available solution. Unbeknownst to the public at large, though, this is a complicated matter that will likely not be solved in our lifetime. And quite frankly, the millennial generation, like it or not, in aggregate, I'm not talking about individual cases, but in aggregate, will suffer the brunt of the issues until society can readjust itself to take hold of the new reality, to be able to workshop through the issues at hand. Meanwhile, us, young people, we're fucked. So, take care of yourself. Easy solutions are not available. We, as a generation, will suffer the brunt of this maelstrom before us. And the sooner we realize this, the sooner that we can actually start making logical plans that don't require us to go at each other's throats